There is a specific kind of peace that only some people know. It happens when you step outside alone. No headphones sometimes, no one to talk to, no destination urgently pulling you forward. Just the rhythm of your own footsteps, the weight of your own thoughts, the quiet company of yourself. And instead of feeling lonely, you feel something that resembles freedom, a lightness, a returning to something. You've probably had the experience of being invited to walk with someone, to commute together, to share a ride, and feeling a small, quiet resistance rise inside you. Not because you don't like that person, not because you're in a bad mood, but because something in you knows that being accompanied will change the quality of that time. That you will have to exist in relation to someone else, calibrate your pace to theirs, manage the conversation, perform presence. And in that moment, what you want more than connection is simply to be with yourself. People who don't understand this often misread it. They see someone who walks alone and think, lonely, antisocial, too proud to ask for company. But you know the truth is something else entirely. You know that walking alone isn't a consolation prize, it's the preference. That the solitude isn't something you're enduring, it's something you're choosing. And that this choice says something real and important about how you process the world. The truth is that for certain minds, solitude isn't the absence of something good. It's the presence of something necessary. And understanding why, understanding the psychology behind this preference, can change how you see yourself and how you explain yourself to a world that doesn't always understand you. If you've ever felt most like yourself when you're alone outside, this video is for you. We're going to explore what psychology says about the need for solitary space, why some people restore themselves in solitude rather than in company, and what it means when the most honest version of you shows up only when no one else is watching. Comment below. Do you prefer to walk, commute, or spend time outside alone? Tell me what that solitude gives you that company doesn't. I want to know how many people identify with this. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology behind behaviors that almost no one understands, subscribe to the channel. To understand why some people genuinely prefer their own company outside, we have to start with one of the most foundational concepts in personality psychology: introversion. And not introversion in the way pop culture has flattened it, the shy person who hates parties, but introversion in its original neurological meaning. Introverts don't dislike people. They are simply wired to process stimulation differently. Where extroverts gain energy from social interaction, introverts spend it. Their nervous systems respond more intensely to external input, which means that more stimulation, more sound, more conversation, more social navigation requires more recovery time. Being social is not painful, but it is costly, and the cost has to be repaid somewhere. When an introvert walks alone, something real happens in the brain. The noise of constant social calibration quiets. The prefrontal cortex, which works hard to manage social behavior, reading cues, regulating responses, choosing words, gets to rest. Attention turns inward. Thoughts that were interrupted all day finally have room to complete themselves. Emotions that were managed in front of others can finally be felt without an audience. Walking alone isn't withdrawal from life. It's the processing of life. Psychologists who study what they call restorative environments have found that solitude, especially solitude in movement, has measurable effects on psychological well-being. The concept of restoration refers to the capacity of certain experiences to replenish our cognitive resources after they've been depleted. Busy social environments, while stimulating, are often depleting. Solitude in natural or semi-natural settings, even just walking down a familiar street alone, activates what researchers call involuntary attention, a soft, unfocused awareness that allows the directed attention system to recover. People who walk alone regularly often report feeling clearer, calmer, and more like themselves afterward. That's not coincidence. That's the nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. There's also something important about the body in this experience, something psychologists call proprioceptive grounding. Proprioception is your sense of your own body in space. The feeling of your feet hitting the pavement, your arms swinging naturally, your breath settling into a rhythm that belongs only to you. When you walk alone, without the diversion of conversation or social performance, your attention can settle into this bodily rhythm. You become more aware of how you're physically moving through the world. And for people who tend to live in their heads, in abstraction, in planning, in mental replay of conversations, this physical grounding can be profoundly regulating. The body becomes an anchor. Movement becomes a kind of meditation that costs nothing and asks nothing of you. Many people who deeply prefer solitude outside grew up in environments that were loud, crowded, emotionally dense or unpredictable. Maybe they had many siblings and the house was always full. Maybe their family communicated loudly and constantly, and the only place they could hear themselves think was outside, walking somewhere alone. Maybe the social dynamics of their household required constant alertness, anticipating moods, managing others' emotions, staying one step ahead of the next emotional wave. So that being truly alone felt like the only place where they didn't have to perform or protect themselves. Over time, solitude didn't just become comfortable, it became necessary. It became the place where the self was most safe. For some, this relationship deepened through adolescence, when the social world becomes intensely complex and exhausting. Navigating peer dynamics, performance, belonging, and identity all at once is genuinely hard. Some people found that walks alone, or solo commutes, or hours spent outside by themselves were the only spaces where the pressure lifted, where they didn't have to be anything for anyone, where they could think through the day, feel what they actually felt, and return to some version of equilibrium before facing the next round of people. The habit became a coping strategy. The coping strategy became a preference. The preference became part of who they are, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's important to distinguish here between chosen aloneness and loneliness because they are not the same thing, and confusing them does real damage to how people see themselves. Loneliness is the pain of unwanted disconnection. It's being alone and wishing you weren't. Chosen aloneness, what some psychologists call solitude as a psychological resource, is something entirely different. It's the recognition that time with yourself has genuine value, that you are capable of being good company for yourself, that not every moment needs to be shared to be meaningful. Research consistently shows that people who have a positive relationship with solitude, who can choose it without anxiety or guilt, tend to have lower rates of loneliness than those who need constant company. The capacity to be alone well is actually a sign of a secure and settled relationship with yourself. But there are costs to this preference, and being honest about them matters. People who consistently prefer solitary time outdoors are often misread by others. Friends interpret the preference for solo walks as a sign of not wanting them around. Partners feel rejected when you'd rather commute alone. Family members read it as arrogance or coldness. Because we live in a culture that still, despite decades of psychology, pathologizes introversion and treats solitude as a symptom rather than a valid choice, people who prefer to be alone often have to justify themselves constantly. And that justification is exhausting in its own way. You end up managing other people's feelings about your need to be alone, which is the opposite of what you were trying to achieve. The more internal cost is subtler, but worth watching for. When solitude becomes so comfortable that it starts functioning as avoidance, the line between restorative retreat and protective withdrawal can blur. If walking alone becomes the only way you can manage difficult emotions, if you rely on solitude so completely that you never develop the capacity to process feelings with others, to receive support, to let someone in when it actually matters, then the preference has crossed into something more limiting. The self that feels so present in solitude can become, over time, only accessible in solitude. And that is a different kind of loneliness, one that lives inside relationships, not outside them. So, how do you maintain what is genuinely healthy about your preference for solitude while staying open to the forms of connection that also nourish you? Here are 3 steps grounded in psychology. Step 1. Name your solitude intentionally. This is what psychologists call purposeful self-awareness. Instead of defaulting to alone time automatically, practice recognizing what you're seeking when you choose solitude. Before your next solo walk, pause for just a moment and ask yourself, am I choosing this because I want to restore or because I'm avoiding something? Both can be true at the same time, and that's okay. The goal isn't to eliminate solitude. It's to understand what it's doing for you. When you know why you're choosing it, you can make better decisions about when to stay in it and when to let someone in. Step 2. Practice graduated presence. This is a behavioral technique drawn from exposure work. If you notice that solitude has quietly become a barrier to intimacy or connection, try small experiments in shared presence that don't require full social performance. Walk with someone in silence. Sit alongside a friend without feeling obligated to fill every moment with words. Allow someone to accompany you without turning it into a task. Connection doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes presence is enough. And learning that another person's company can be gentle rather than demanding gently expands your capacity for togetherness without sacrificing what you love about being alone. Let your solitude be generative, not only escapist. The most restorative form of alone time isn't purely passive, it's creative. Use your solitary walks to think through something that matters, to feel fully what you've been managing all day, to observe the world around you with real attention. Psychologists call this active solitude, and it's linked to higher creativity, better emotional regulation, and a stronger sense of personal identity. When your alone time has even a loose direction, processing, creating, noticing, it becomes a resource you carry back into the world with you rather than a refuge you reluctantly have to leave behind. There is something quietly radical about knowing yourself well enough to choose your own company. About recognizing that the self is not a burden to escape, but a presence worth returning to. Most people spend their lives either overstimulated by others or terrified of being alone, careening between noise and dread. You've found something they haven't yet. That solitude is not emptiness. It is fullness of a different kind. The world will keep misreading you. People will keep asking why you didn't want company, why you walked home alone, why you seem so content without the constant presence of others. And you may spend years finding the right words to explain something that lives mostly in feeling. But you don't have to justify what restores you. You don't have to perform extroversion to prove you're okay. You don't have to fill silence with conversation to prove you're connected. Walking alone isn't a statement about other people. It's a conversation with yourself, one that, for you, is irreplaceable. It's the place where the noise of the day finally settles and you can hear what you actually think, where your feelings catch up with your body, where the person you are without an audience finally gets some air. There is a kind of courage in this, even when it doesn't feel like one, to know what you need, to choose it without apology, to carry the company of your own self through a world that never quite stops moving, and to find in that motion something that feels like coming home. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who always needs a little time alone to feel like themselves again. And if you want to keep understanding the psychology behind attitudes that almost no one explains, subscribe to the channel. Because the most intimate relationship of your life is the one you have with your own solitude, and it deserves to be understood.